Hi, everybody. Today, my mommy is going to talk about George H.W. Bush.
Thank you, Noah, for introducing George H.W. Bush, the 41st President of the United States. George Herbert Walker Bush was born in Milton, Massachusetts in 1924. His father, Prescott Bush, was an investment banker who served as a Republican senator from Connecticut for 11 years. Prescott Bush was a moderate Republican who supported Republican President Eisenhower. Prescott's son, George, became the 41st President of the United States, and his grandson, George Jr., became the 43rd President of the United States. Another grandson of his, John, also known as Jeb, became the governor of Florida, making the Bush family one of the most prolific political families in American history. George H.W. Bush joined the U.S. Navy during World War II and at 18 years old became the youngest Navy officer to get his pilot's wings. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for the bravery he showed during the war. After returning home from war, he married Barbara Pierce and they had 6 children together, including future President George W. Bush and future Governor Jeb Bush. George H.W. Bush enrolled at Yale University, and after graduation, he moved to Texas and landed a job at an oil field supply company. In 1953, he started his own petroleum company with a friend. His oil company was very successful, making Bush a millionaire at 41 years old. George H.W. Bush served several roles in the 1970s. He was a U.S. representative from Texas, then U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, then U.S. envoy to China, and finally director of the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA. When Ronald Reagan ran for the office of president in 1980, he offered the position of vice president to George H.W. Bush, recognizing his many accomplishments. Although his views were not in complete alignment with Reagan, Bush proved to be a very valuable vice president, focusing on foreign policy by visiting 60 countries over the course of his 8 years as vice president. Under unique circumstances, Bush became the temporary president on July 13, 1985, when President Reagan underwent cancer surgery. This was the first time in history that the role of president was formally transferred, even if it was only for 8 hours. George H.W. Bush won the election of 1988 by a significant margin, 426 electoral votes to 111. You might think that it's common for a vice president to win election as president following his service as vice president. It turns out that George H.W. Bush became the first vice president in over 150 years to follow up his years as vice president by being elected president. The last president to accomplish the feat was the 8th president, Martin Van Buren. Many vice presidents had become presidents since, but only due to the assassination or resignation of the president. During his campaign, he made a pledge not to raise taxes, although he wasn't able to fulfill that promise. As a moderate Republican, he found a way to upset both Democrats, but more conservative Republicans as well. Many of his domestic policies were in sharp contrast to the policies of Ronald Reagan. He arranged for more regulation in businesses, supported social and civil rights programs, and he passed the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Clean Air Act, which was designed to fight pollution. President Bush had an outstanding record of foreign policy, probably due in large part to the years of preparation he received as vice president. He helped end racial segregation in South Africa. He presided over the collapse of the Soviet Union. His biggest accomplishment in foreign policy was probably his role in Operation Desert Storm. In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait and prepared to invade Saudi Arabia and Iran in an attempt to control the world's oil supply. Bush helped create an international coalition to defeat Iraq, which included several Arab countries. President Bush deployed 425,000 troops in what became known as Operation Desert Shield. In less than 2 months, Iraq withdrew all their troops from other countries, ending the Gulf War. Following the Gulf War, President Bush was very popular, and his re-election seemed certain. Unfortunately for him, the economy went south leading up to the election of 1992. He wasn't able to convince a Democratic Congress to pass a package designed to cut the federal deficit and stimulate the economy. He also built up distrust with the American people when he raised taxes after saying just 4 years earlier, "Read my lips, no new taxes." Join Olivia and her dad tomorrow when they get curious about refrigerators. Until next time, stay curious.